Welcome back. We have Ata Deniz Oktay in this session. We will be speaking about how to the scope of the first that have been developed. You may start. The presentation is in English, but I'll be speaking in Turkish. It's a presentation of 40 pages. I may have been wrong as I was preparing the timing, but I will some parts of I will stick with it as well. Ata Deniz Oktay is my name. You may find me by typing "he's not there." I'm studying applied and computational maths at it doesn't have a counterpart foreign universities. That's why I put it this way. I'm interested in design and programming. A lot of engineers that I've been using despite unlike many other developers. I think I've been using a lot of engineers how years. Roguelike and roguelite genre, they are the genres that I have more command of, although I have more interest in other genres, but I'm mostly sticking to roguelike and roguelite. And the examples I'll share at the end of my presentation would be that Warcraft 3 is different here as well. Well, this is an area that I wasn't professionally involved in, but I have somewhat been involved in it. I frequently played it as I was younger, when I was younger. And there are many other genres inside it. That's why I like it a lot. Why am I making this speech? I will deliberate on that a little bit. Well, I've taken part in over 20 games. Some of them resulted in disappointment, and some of them were nice. My partner is also with me, and we've seen great class as well. We failed 2 indie games, and how did it be? Some successful, but I believe that we've acquired good experience there. And at the end of the day, I failed a few projects, and overscoping was the reason behind it. I wasn't taking for the scope of it. So the wrong scoping resulted us being not able to estimate the business, and why we didn't really come up with any products. So the entire presentation is going to be about that. Let's determine the scope of the game and let's make sure that the game becomes successful. I think it was a problem that I witnessed a lot in Turkey. When I am invited to events, I really like to think upon that. If we can overcome this hurdle, the independent gaming industry Turkey will make further progress. And we are planning to leave the title in 2023. So is a side note that I wanted to share. These are the things that I mentioned. I am delivering this to raise awareness. These are the parts of the presentation. We will first look at the scope of it and what kind of examples we can do. And then we will talk about when to determine the scope. So what is the right time for us to determine the scope at which stage of game development, and how the scope the scope your first in the title. We will focus on that. Pre-production is are determining the scope. We will look at the stages. Planning is more confident here, so there is not production phase here. We will look at here the competencies and the skills of the how to put the scopes in the scope, and we will look at the scope for game design to make sure that avoiding over scoping failures, and we look at the validate the side of it. So is this a reliable scope? and come to test it. And then we will proceed with production. This is the area where we can set the scope. So work is less intensive compared to pre-production. There will be different iterations here. It's possible to change the scope. People will get them of theme and what does the team think about it. Um, and every part of the project and every developer that is working on it. So to what extent and to what extent they are here. So we need to uh, avoid any mistakes here and how to focus on the scope of. Well, I'm not going to talk about the technical details here because I want the programmers to implement them in their own talking about some algorithms as well. In independent gaming sector, well, especially in this is quite possible for you to plug into examples and arguments are set accordingly and proposed accordingly. But Astronaut, can you played it? Well, no hands have been raised here. Well, it is a nice game and it's quite a successful game. And I really would like to develop with it. And Syncarix, you probably heard it, especially if you on indie titles. Space Gladiators, Los Potato, Rotato. Well, it's more like an example, especially after its visibility on social media for streamers and for content developers on YouTube. It's become quite popular. And Space Gladiators and Lost Potato and Potato, the developer is the same person. And that's why I added 3 games here and how they failed and how they have been successful in setting the scope. I will be finishing my timing because I don't want to overrun my time. What is scope? Let's look at it. Well, I would like to call it framing as well. It is basically us setting the frame of it. And these are some examples of development. We have 3D artists. So do we have 3D artists here? We have one. 3D artists. What does it entail when we have the artists in the process? But what is it the extent that you would like to reach? Are you going to have programmers for procedural animations, for example? There are 2 scopes here. Are you going to focus on programming or are you going to focus on 3D arts, for example? So these choices will help frame. You will focus on a particular field and you understand the extent to which you will focus on. So 3D artists, we have been working with them. Kıvanç is one of them. And even if it is not attack, and we would like to have one directional attacks as well, but it required us to draw a lot of drawings, but it was always scoping and canvas size and so 320 to 380. So our animations and pixel arts are on canvas of 40 to 40, and this is not a lot. 64 would probably require us to work on it quite a lot. Some tower defense thing, we are developing it. How many towers are we going to add, and how many properties will we need to have that require coding? So there are all these different product development stages. So that's why I'm scoping. Now to set scope. Well, a few slides ago, I talked about pre-production and production. I'm going to proceed to pre-production and production. Well, at this particular stage, the second scope there is more solid. It's more like town choice there. The first in the title and what kind of a scope phase that it should go through. Well, we have some entertaining and fun guys here. They're not really laughing because they haven't been able to set the scope, and those on the right hand side have set the scope very well. So this is how I wanted to proceed. And here are some criteria. And at the end of the day, this will bring us to good scope setting. And the first is experience. What about the experience of your team? About general sector or experience within the team. So, you may have a diverse range of projects that you worked on, but when you start working on a new project, you feel more comfortable to work on multiple projects. So this is one important criterion in setting the scope. So the higher the number of projects you worked on, the better you are in adapting yourself. So it is quite reasonable and it's quite logical. The second is reusable assets. So you will write one time and you will use it multiple times. If you are programmers and if you have adopted certain design patterns and if you have been making games in similar genres, mobile games, for example, all the assets can be used over and over so that the production is quite fast. And we see it in the industry as well. And using the assets again in the sector, in the industry, rather than the internal mechanics game, the sound system, interface, and the system of settings, or if you are creating the game in the same universe and if it's a cell-based product or map generation, these are all the properties that you are working with. And general familiarity is important to this. So what is the knowledge that you have about it? And this helps you with the scope in the genre where you are consuming a lot and producing what you can make sure that the scope is more advanced because your experience there is quite extensive. At the end of the day, you have proper scoping and your projects do not fail. Pre-production and setting the scope in pre-production, how to do it. We have multiple methods here. The first is setting the scope according to the theme. As we mentioned here, each and every point here can be about your own team. But one part about your team is the type of projects that the team has worked on. So if you are working with a pixel artist, if they only create static things or did they work on animation before? And if this is not the case, other people within your team should be redirected to these kinds of areas so that the burden on the animation should be taken away. So business volumes should be delegated accordingly and it avoid any failure in projects. I will be looking at my notes, so our time is limited. Game design and setting the scope at game design. This is more comprehensive for us. In the previous game design workshops, we talked about mechanics and systems, and I talk a lot about this stage, but here is general info. As you are designing the game, you decide on certain points, and when you do it, you set scope to a great extent. So setting the genre is getting here. You look at the platform and you then understand the mechanical systems, and the developers will understand what they will work on, and it is easy to program and schedule everything and the testing scope. And this is something that I comprehensively talked about at other workshops. Have you heard MDA approach before? This is more like an academic aspect, and this is not employed a lot in game design. But what do we do? At pre-production, like I said, the scope at pre-production, it is the stage where right before the production is you're setting the scope, you the team, what can they do? And after you look at it, we would like to focus on the design. So we be putting some things that the team is capable of doing and then testing it. And at the testing stage, we have three components. The first is MDA. There is a small explanation. You can read MDA. It's all about a formal approach, and in this academic article, I think it is dated back to 2000s, but I think it's quite pertinent, it's quite valid today, and there are citations. And this is all about the common language, the shared language, so it doesn't have a implication on the production, but the terms in this particular approach and the aesthetics in this approach, you understand what the game is trying to promise you. And the game may be promising that to you, and then you understand. So we debunk the entire game. So we have certain aesthetic principles, mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. And these are all aesthetics. I'm not going to talk about mechanics and dynamics. These aesthetics may be present in one game with different intensity. And when it comes to debunking the game design, well, when we look at a certain game and look at the certain design, some of them can be clear. Well, if you don't five of them, you seeing certain components here, it means that game design is good, fundamentally. And let's pick a game genre here that are good for this particular structure. I'm not gonna tell each and every one of them, but I can cover all of them. Metroidvania, Metroidvania, adventure drive is quite hard there. It pushes the user to go back to the points where they all failed. So discovery is the drive, and the success of discovery comes to the fore a lot. These are the games. Metroidvania is not really an easy genre, so giving motivation for the user to stick to the game. So the challenge aspect is quite strong. And Metroidvania, to bring the narrative to the fore, you will see narrative a lot, or although the narrative is not that visible, the surrounding elements and the atmosphere, they're quite strong, and the fantasy aesthetics that comes to the fore there. For Metroidvania, or Hollow Knight is more like a tangible example here. About the MDA approach, according to the MDA approach, we have four the pieces of aesthetics here, and it speaks to us. And it means that the design of that game is not that broad. What do we mean? That the scope didn't try to address all the dimensions, and it could be multiplayer, involving a lot of discovery uh, and a lot of challenges, and at the same time, it's going to be a game which involves hyper casual as well. At the end of the day, we have five components that we find ourselves trying to do things with. And in terms of scope, it's not that conducive. So it is a sign that it's going to fail. So the MDA approach, its formal approach, is we are debunking the game. Disassemble the game if we look at them. If there's a fundamental design there, uh, we will be able to analyze where this game is trying to reach. Diablo, for example, loot is important there, and narrative elements are also there. Diablo is we're playing Diablo. There are different maps, and we lose ourselves in it. And submission is quite important there, together with loot and for our challenge. The components of the game, they're important as well. Although the narrative is quite intensive, there is not really an effort to convey the narrative. Although there is an effort there, you don't find yourself carried away by it, because the loot part, the challenge part, or the action part, they're more intensive, they're stronger. So for Diablo, you see some of them quite intensively. Quantic Foundry's player motivation model, have you heard of it? And those on the front seats have joined my previous workshop, so they understand it. So this is another way to understand the game. So Quantic Foundry's player motivation model is a very good tool, and you can see some keywords there. And keywords coincide with one another quite a lot. So Quantic Foundry, what does it mean? This is where social sciences and data sciences merge, and a data set is being created for the user. It is analyzed, and this is the categorized what the users are looking for. And there are 6 categories, and you have different subcategories as well. And player motivation model is composed of all of them. As we are setting the scope as a project manager, how do we use it? We may do a game, we may create a game, and we understand the capabilities of our own team and how to address it, how to really evaluate it, and which model here is making it more accessible. So Meteoric Mania, let's focus on that specifically. Hollow Knight. Excitement, distraction, it may not be that strong, but excitement is there. There is always an action. It is always about your heartbeat, and there is this drive to play faster. So this is the progress. And the social side, it is not that strong. And for mastery, your challenge aspect is quite there and present. And strategy, we do it quite a lot, but this is not one of the focal points. And completion, if you're a completionist, it may be something that will interest you a lot. And Hollow Knight has a lot of completion focus. And the narrative may be good, but it doesn't really make it quite bare to you. And it gives you it's a bit of push, and it's basically hides certain things for you to discover it. But the fantasy aspect is quite heavy, it is quite present. And for creativity, one, two, three, four, we have room for the player motivation model. We can see four subcategories. So among 12 of them, we can see four of them quite clearly, and the others aren't that visible. So it may not be overscoping because they stick to certain of them and the rest they didn't really care. So this is all about how much should we stretch our arms, let's say. And prototyping is a costly part. After you define a game, when you're looking at stuff, what do we do? We do an MBA. This is quite a thinking-oriented process. And for quantitative boundaries, player motivation model, we still have a data set here. There's a system. We have reports, and we're trying to understand whether or not we be successful at it. And the most tangible way for you to analyze whether you overscope this prototyping. So production, it is important to prototype the main mechanic systems. And if you think that you're not able to do it, it means the project is overscope. And before you proceed, you need to shift certain things and you need to change the places of certain aspects. And for game development, for example, and how to really make shifts here. Well, these are the things that changes from team to team. And for the production side, what kind of a the scope thing or what kind of a change can we do? It's a bit different here because this is all about awareness within the team. You start something and you will put something in the team, but how to really continue like this? Will you be able to proceed with production for 10 other weeks or 20 weeks? So based on the projects that I did in the past, RPG elements were present in our game and we were interacting with different characters. And it was on this interaction that we would want to win karma. And with the items that we obtained, we wanted it to be wanted to exchange them as well. It was a complex system. As a programmer, I realized that, and I decided to not do it. And think that I would invest in it rather than doing it. I wanted to focus my energy to polish it. So in a way, I changed the business the division of the energy actually. So this is how I reduced the extent to which I stretched. So this was how I made use of my awareness. When you first start a game, pre-production, for example, canvas can be a certain dimension. It may be a very huge canvas for you for pixel games. And then your character animations may be 128 and it may be a very huge dimension for pixel art. And as you're doing it, you will bump into many problems. So these awareness pre-production, but it may not really come to the fore. So 5 or 6 characters, you drew it on a canvas 128, and you also drew another thing, so 512, for example, and you realize that the animation will not be ready. And this is why you need to reduce the canvas size. It may be a little late awareness, so you can still proceed with the project, and this is how you can keep control of the scope. And testing outcomes is another aspect. This is a field where it's going to be detailed, but first I will continue with the testing side. Normally for this workshop, well, had I allocated more time to this workshop, I would be talking about it more because this is the technical side. Because if you are doing something based on data, some algorithms will be there. And one of them is the clear feedback. What does the user want here? Any content that the user doesn't want. Although you have a feedback and you may want to keep it inside the game, it may be over scope because it is something that stands in the way of selling the game because I don't know which success criteria you will be following, but it is basically an obstacle in front of the sales of your games if you are focusing on another system. So one example of that is City Builder. And City Builder, it may be quite a comforting one, and you wanted to finish it in 6 months. I don't know if it can be finished. So we want City Builder to be finished in 6 months. And within this City Builder, the procedural generation is not going to be involved, is not going to be integrated, otherwise you can't really finish it. But when we bring out the game, people would like to have procedural generation. They would like to see different rounds. And will we add this to the scope? Will we include this in the scope? This is something that expands the scope. Let's imagine that we would like to do it and we believe that we can do it. And there are people who can do it in the team. Okay, let's add it into the scope. And what about us and how to really deal with the business volume that is now higher? Is there any part that we can save from, for example, from the arts? It's not going to be changed here because procedural generation, what we call it, is related with programming. And this is why we need to create new sets. So there will be different shifts. And as we are doing this, we are looking at the systems and main mechanics. And back builder mechanics can be another set of dynamics. So procedural generation we have, but as even if we improve the production capacity, we don't really want to deal with the timing of the game. So the mechanics and systems that intertwine with each other, we can reduce the connection. So as we add something, we reduce some other things, and this is how we are still on the track.
What comes to you? Do you want to add? If you want to add, where do you limit it? Another testing is based on data. Let's say you have made a game in Unity and Arial. I don't know if it's in Unreal, but in Unity it exists. In Google Forms, etc. You can shift your data there, and inside the game, if you program it well in the gaming engine, like with an event system, you can see more or less how much time the player is spending in every place. Let's say a strategic game with inventory system and RPG elements, with also some action. This Slate Aspire with tech example, there are two different sides. One is where you're active inside the game. You play the cards, you eliminate the enemy and try to go to the next level. And the other section where you build your own deck, you look at the menus, look at the old cards, new cards, and you play and create your own deck. Between the two, there are also some random events. There are random events, and after random events, there is an event. This could be a fight, deck building event, market, and then there's a fight. Let's say there's such a loop. We start with the war side first. People are trying to kill the enemy and play the partner, and then they get new cards and spend time to add that to their decks. And then with random events, they do other choices to gain currency. When we look at this loop, how much time is spent and what is looked at, to what extent? This is the question. For instance, do they look at the visuals of the card or look at the card or the enemy? In the loop inside the game, you can see where the player is spending time and express it in a percentage way. And this can tell us how much time you should spend in different parts of the art of the game. In random events, there is tabs and 3 or 4 choices. And I'm a project manager. I have a programmer, an artist, myself, and a designer, let's say, in the team. In random events, it will be visual how much time the person is spending. So to the art, this tells you how much work you have to give to the artist. For instance, how detailed should the character on the left-hand side be? How much time should I spend on it? The answer depends on how much time the user spends there. From a game design perspective, it's about how detailed the system will be. Is the user spending too much time? Do they like it, or do they just click and go? This will show you how much time you should spend there. This is same for the visuals of the cards. Maybe during war, it's not very important, but in deck building, you spend more time, so more depth can be added. Rather than playing visual assets, you may want to spend more time with the deck building visual asset. For instance, Bolt of the Void is a good example. The war mechanism is very intense and deep. Deck building is much more intense. There are many more elements. You're not just building a deck. You are adding different modifiers to cards. So 90% of the game happens on the deck building interface. So maybe in art, you may have to focus there to make it more attractive and shape the scope accordingly. Before, let's finish this part first. This is the project management side, how you can do the scope shifting. There are more than one managing the project, 5 or 6 in a team. When you divide them into departments, there will usually be 4. For instance, there's game design, art, programming, and project management, or sound outside art. When there's project management, how can we change the scope? First of all, the project manager should look at the development speed of all developers in the team to see whether they are efficient enough. In a scenario, let's say there is more burden on the 3D side, and programmers, before they do their animation, they need 3D assets, but they do not get it in time. So not much progress is made in programming. So what should be done in this regard? Rather than increasing scope, in order to focus on decreasing scope, you can get asset help from outside. You can outsource rather than creating from scratch. You can use asset packs, which would decrease the burden. Such a shifting can be done. I'm interested in the programming, for instance, in order to make progress, certain art assets are needed, but they're not fast enough in the current composure. I have to provide them fast enough so that programming can make progress. This could be a small example to this. The first thing I mentioned is each department slowing down. Which department is slowing down? For instance, in the previous example, it was the art department that was limiting. If we change this plan, would it be more efficient? This is about scope decreasing or increasing. We increase the scope, and will it be more efficient or less efficient when we do so? For instance, based on the same example, there's a big scope in art and it's not making progress. It has turned into a bottleneck. But if we want to make progress the same way, we can increase the scope to give more tasks to programming, and without production getting longer or shorter, we can increase the scope. This is a positive development, increasing the scope. We don't always want this. This happens rarely. Usually, we do the opposite. We try to decrease things. What kind of a scenario we can put into play to decrease it? Let's say we're doing a 2D pixel art game. This is our project. This is a real life scenario. And inside the game, there are more than 30 enemies that we fight and kill. There are four, or let's say there are two, because four sounds a bit too many in our game. Let's say there are two main characters and 30 enemies. There are many animations of the main character. The enemies should have animations as well, but uh, 2 and 30 are different. There's a 15 time difference in between. Also, depending on how detailed the animation should be, they will have more detailed animation, so that we have to do many animations at the end of the day. How can we change the scope? We can do small tricks, for instance, in our current project. Even if an enemy is not attacking, we can make it look like they are attacking to imitate the attack. Let's say there's an enemy in our game. In order to attack normally, if it is going to do a punch, it has to take his hand back and then forward. This is a lot of frames, a lot of work. How did we do this without expanding the scope? The character is going back and forth, just like it's preparing to make an attack, and then coming here very quickly, and the anticipation and hit frame can be modeled this way in a rapid way, but without any animation. So what am I doing here? Rather than drawing an animation by spending less time in programming, I'm able to meet that need. So less animations, less detail at the end of the day, but ending in time and released. This is the purpose of this presentation. We should decrease the scope so that the project doesn't fail. If the project is failing, of course, you can expand the scope, but if you're expanding and then decreasing, the project may fail. This was one of our biggest problems in our previous projects. We wanted to do many things all at once, and we couldn't finish the projects, and we got unhappy. So in order to stop the same mistake in subsequent projects, we're doing our best. This is related to the first example that I gave. The volume or time doesn't change, but there are shifts inside. Does this make sense? Without increasing the overall time, can I shift things inside without expanding the time or decreasing the time? Is this okay? Sometimes we want to expand or decrease the time. Maybe it will make sense to add new things, but when the scope is important and when a scope needs to be decreased to thrive the project, it makes more sense to play with the time and decrease the scope. This is the most fun aspect of the project. Some success examples from abroad. So what have we done so far and what are we going to see soon? If we come back, in the pre-production, how could we set the scope? And one of them is the team. How many developers do I have? What are their capabilities? And when there's project management, how much work can I assign where? This is our first item in pre-production. Then a game design. Are my references clear, category clear, the mechanics and systems clear? And it shouldn't be over scope. There are 10 mechanics and or are there two, the robust ones in game design. Then I test, I look at MDA. I can show a few very clearly here. When I want to divide the game, a few can be seen very clearly. For instance, there's challenge, fellowship, expression. Three are very clear and the others are not that much. I'm on the right track. Quantic Foundry's player motivation model. There should be competition, community, challenge, and power. I can see these very clearly. Others are not as marked. which means I'm getting closer to the right way. And then I prototype. I have prototyped my systems. I polish them on the way. Does this make me feel good? If it's okay, everything is nice. I'm not overscope yet. Then I finish planning and I come to production. And in production, the first thing that I look at is whether everything is still going well or are still some things wrong in the team and there's new awareness that we cannot do this. This is the first thing that I should look at. If there is awareness that certain things cannot be done, I shift the scope so that they can be done. If there are no problems, okay, I go ahead. I test the game myself and make the users test it. Where is the game headed? What does the player want? And am I able to deliver what the player wants, or do I have to change the scope? After I do these adjustments, then in production, every part of production, are they going well? Are they synchronized with each other? Is one making progress, but the other one is stalling? This is very important. Voice designers are very fast, and if it's not a voice sound focused game, you have to manage production there well so that they don't lag, they make progress. And they can make progress in a synchronized way with the others. You have to manage this well. Every example that I give is taken from the devlogs or interviews of uh, game producers. And you can hear everything that I said directly from the mouth of the interviewees here. These are not very extreme examples. Every independent developer here with a few years example can reach these levels and generate good independent games. And that is our purpose as a team. The first example is Astronaut. Not many people know this. This game is a roguelike auto battler game. Each run is a different experience and characters fight automatically. I couldn't get a big visual, but you can see many characters on the right hand side. Each black silhouette here is a character. There are so many characters. They have their own assets. In terms of game design, this is very intense. There is a very diverse amount of items and with characters that diversity increases. How long did this game take to do? 1 year, according to what the developer says. And it was the first game experience of the developer. So how much experience did they have before this first experience? They had 4 years of web programming experience. And all the examples that I will give in this presentation belongs to full-time developers, people who do this 5 days or maybe 7 days a week, 60 or 80 hours working every week. And what's the price? $15. How much revenue did they have? In Steam Spy and SteamDB, according to SteamDB and other databases, it got more than $100,000 and 10,000 owners are in the game. What does this developer say in one of his interviews? At the end of the day, I can say with certainty that I spent as much time on the art as I did programming the game. I did manage to avoid throwing over 100 item sprites thanks to the variety of packages that you can find for a low price for free. Maybe you can not see the art very clearly here, or maybe you can look on your phones. The pixel art is almost non-existent and is bad. It is compared to the pixel arts that we like and we see, it's not attractive in any way. It is stable. Everything is stable. The background, the characters, the interface, no problems. But in terms of the overall quality of art, you could say it didn't have to be this way. And the developer says, I did as much art as I did programming, so I spent a lot of time on art, but the visual shows us that if he balanced with game design, he could get more positive reviews and he could finish the game better, so he could maybe have more profits. This was one of the examples. He used ready asset pack in order to decrease artwork. He looks at art, it takes as much time as programming, it should take more. Otherwise, within the scope, the game will not be finished. So he uses ready packages, and in 2 or 3 weeks, he can save time, 2 or 3 weeks. This is a direct reflection of the examples that we see. Trying to learn to produce music and sound effects was a step too far. I just didn't have the time. I picked what I believe to be the simplest and cheapest option, stock assets. So in music and sound, he wanted to learn something. Let me give some background info. He learned for the first time in this project how to do pixel art, according to the interview. So after spending so much time here, when it comes to sound effects and music, he noticed that it wouldn't be viable to spend this much time on it. So he preferred to buy ready made by stock. So this is what he did. Another comment is, I didn't enlist any marketing teams or services. I did the legwork of spending every relevant gaming publication and other and content creator a neatly formatted HTML email with a game key enclosed. I also put up a simple website to house a press kit. With my background in web development, all it cost me was the domain name. So there were four stages: experience, user asset, and genre familiarity. When we look at reusable assets, this person had 4 years of web programming experience, so he used this directly for the marketing needs of the game. For instance, on the HTML side, or when preparing an email in template creating, I'm not competent in this. If I try to do this as an indie, probably I have to allocate 1 week to this, and this is workload for me. But this person probably in a few days' time was able to create the content and the template, and he was able to save 4 days. Yeah, 4 days is 32 hours. And when you look at the developer's salary abroad, let's say $15 per hour multiplied by 32, it means more than $400. This reflects on your production costs. For that reason, we see that they shrink the scope, and with their own experience, he was able to decrease the scope. Vendor bosses video's thumbnail is here. This was one of the content creators that I also like, who emphasized this game. I wanted to add him here. Another 1 week before full release. Exactly 1 week after full release, YouTuber Retromation opened the floodgates with a Let's Play. Over the course of 3 days, sales increased by 4,500%. You can see the first video of the game. A few videos were shot and they were a lot of fun. I believe this was fun. I like this game a lot.
Yes, the trying to learn produce music and sound effects was a bit too difficult. It's a bit too difficult. Or the marketing, I did it myself, but I did the experience, so I spent less time than I would normally do. That's why my scope has been reduced. And this is an additional comment. It was our first example, but look at the statistics and how accessible the game is. And Turkish standards, well, getting this or earning this revenue. I don't know if we have any independent player. We have some examples from Turkey. Well, these have already passed that level of revenues. I think they have exceeded this figure as well. They're okay, but smaller developers who produced independent games before the age of 30. I think it they didn't reach numbers because of scoping activities, because Turkish developers aren't really familiar with it. They don't really look at it. So consumers may not be developers. So in a way, it turns into a very small cluster. So many of them produce here, and that being quite accessible. I just want to Mr. Ata, this is the end of our speech. So if you can conclude. Okay, here are the last examples. Um, this is a very accessible example. But for 1 year, due to overscoping, they were unable to conclude the game. They didn't put the game to the latest version, and then they did this game in 3 months only. So they have retained a value of over 100,000 USD. We promised an update for this game, and they did the same. They made the same mistakes, and they overscoped their projects, and they announced that they wouldn't be able to complete it. So they directly said that they wouldn't be able to make it. And in the past, the prototypes that we did for smaller scope projects, we decided to do it. You can understand all of this comment. And the second comment is related with the success that I attained. It made me quite confident. I was overly confident, but it made me fall back to my old ways. So as a developer, I would like to uh, get more experience, acquire more experience. So the same person developed these 3 games. I don't remember the name right now, but a blogfish. You search it to see the name. This is the game that they first started developing. They have a programming experience of 2 years. So in 3 months, they decided to do this project, but it finished in 2.5 years. And the estimated revenue is as follows. So this is a developer who works full time. These are the comments, as you can see. These are one of the comments related with overscoping. You may see its video on YouTube. So as they work on the game, they improve themselves as a developer. But then they want to redo and improve things. So this is a comment, and it is linked with this. And when they try to add more things, they realize that they cannot really add further things. So it also adds production time. And the bigger your game is, the longer it takes to do anything. Because the systems and mechanics here, they all have interactions with one another. In this new structure, you try to come up with new layers of interaction, but in a bigger project, it is hundreds of them. And this is why at the beginning of the production, the mechanics may be quite repetitive, but when you try to edit at the end of the production, it is overscoping. And if I had to start again, I would probably try to make the slowest game I can do without trying to make money off, he says. And this is the second game that they did. And they did it in a time period of 2.5 years. And the production time was only a month, and this is the revenue. Well, you may think about it as 1,000 because a Brotato was released, and revenues probably have gone up a little bit, but they didn't really have many comments about that. One thing I want you to take into account is roguelike, and volatile. And the comment is I wanted to see how quickly I could make a Polish commercial game, and he focused on it. And uh, they checked if publishing small games could be more profitable, and they used a lot of code, and this reduced production volume. And because they had made a game, it was easy for them to contact the influencers compared to YouTube games. So they did experiments with different languages as well. And this is the last page. I'm gonna skip to that. And you probably know it. they bring together their all previous experiences. They had a production time of 6 to 12 months, and they attained revenues up to 3 billion USD. And on Steam and awards, so them being in the same category, you can see the success of it. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.